I saw another guy eat the white without touching the yolk. Never touched the yolk until all he had was the yolk in the center of the plate. And then he took his fork and he slid it under the yolk, picked it up.
We don't care about plot, we care about the human being in the story.
Yeah, the human being is what matters. If the reader doesn't care about the human being, they could care less about the plot. Everybody tries to come up with plot. I mean, plot's important, and I could do a whole lecture on the difference between plot and story. There is a difference. Story is the chronological sequence of the events. A plot is how you arrange the sequences. And sometimes you don't always start at the beginning and go to the end. Sometimes you start at the end, and then you go to the beginning, and then you go to the middle. Then you have a flashback. I mean, plot is much different than story. But when you're writing a story or your plot, if the protagonist, whether it's first person or third person, if the reader doesn't care about that character, why would they care about the plot? They care about a character, and then they want to see what's going to happen to the character, and that's the story. So character is most important. Every writer will tell you that. It's almost a cliche. Grab any writer, any published writer off the street and say, what's the most important thing? And they'll go, character. Now, once you've got your character will lead you to your story and to your plot. Even if you've already got it made up and figured out and outlined it, characters change their mind. Characters don't always do what you want them to do. They will tell you what they want to do and what they want to say. And all of a sudden, your character leaves for Tierra del Fuego, and I didn't plan on that, but now they're on a ship going to Tierra del Fuego, and they're meeting a tall, dark woman with a long cigarette holder and a cigarette that has a long ash. Whoa, where do I go with that? You don't know. It's accidental. So once you've got character, then the character will create your plot. And where does character come from? Character comes from the voice. If you're in the deep voice and the character is narrating from the deep voice, or the third person narrator is in the deep voice, that creates compelling character. So voice creates character, character creates plot.
And it can be no other way, right? Can't reverse.
I would never say it can't be any other way. Okay. What I'm saying is that in general, if your story does not have a character that people relate to, your story isn't going to be enough. And the way you get people to relate to a character is through the authentic voice. They hear that intimate voice, and suddenly that character is real and is alive. But I'm not going to say it's the only way. It's the way I think it should be, because that will succeed for you. Like I said, I don't think there's a writer out there that will tell you character doesn't matter. They're going to tell you character matters.
What are the steps to developing and building a character?
I actually teach a class in that. Well, one, establishing the voice. How does that character talk? How do they see the world? What is their attitude toward the world? And then you've got to collect a lot of details that I have my students make a character checklist. Not for any one character, but for any character. And you should be keeping this checklist for the rest of your life. Anytime you see something that looks interesting about a character, or you think about it, or you see it in a movie, or you read it in a book, make a note of it. And then when you start developing a character, riffle through your checklist and see what you got that's kind of interesting. So you want to find things that make the character compelling because of little things. What do they keep in their refrigerator? How do they wear their clothes? How do they eat eggs? How do they eat sunny side up eggs? So you should be paying attention. You know, a lot of writers, they don't pay attention. They've been to a coffee shop or cafe 100 times and they've never really looked at how people eat. If you look at how people eat, everybody eats a particular way. The way they hold a fork, the way they cut their food. Sunny side up eggs, you should watch 10 different people eat sunny side up eggs, and every one of them will do it differently. I saw one guy, he cut the white, put it on the fork, dipped it into the yolk, okay, and eat it. And the yolk would come up white. So he kind of kept doing that. I saw another guy eat the white without touching the yolk. Never touched the yolk until all he had was the yolk in the center of the plate. And then he took his fork and he slid it under the yolk, picked it up, and I tell you, to me, I couldn't do that. Gets his fork under the yolk, and the whole thing, like he'd been waiting the whole meal to get to that yolk. Now, to me, yolk creeps me out. I've got to mix it up. When I was a kid, my dad would have to cut it all up for me because I didn't even want to dip it I wanted it all cut in little pieces and all mixed together. It would be a scrambled sunny side up egg, and I would eat it that way, dipping my toast into it. If you look at people eat their food, you'll find a lot. So you could do a checklist on hundreds of little things about people. What does their refrigerator look like? Everybody's refrigerator looks differently. And when I go visit a friend or anybody's house, even if it's a stranger, someone says, oh, let's go over to my friend's house or something. I look at their refrigerator and I look at their medicine cabinet. And I look at their books.
Oh, interesting.
I can tell more about a person by their medicine cabinet, their refrigerator, and the books they have than anything else. Whatever they are acting like, I know about them by that. Now, as a writer, I'm going to make notes of things I find interesting so that I'll use that in a book for a character. People who have 10-day-old milk in the back, or they have lots of Tupperware and everything is in there and it's already moldy. How do people arrange their refrigerator? Some are obsessive compulsive. They've got everything neat and perfect. So same with the medicine cabinet. Boy, the medicine cabinet tells you everything.
Oh, like what?
Somebody's got a tube of cream that's been blech, and the cream hasn't been used in about a year, but they've kept it because who knows, that rash may come back. And you can see the cream that was squished out of the top is now brown, and it's been, they didn't even press it neatly or something. One guy's got his toothpaste and he rolls it as he goes. Another person, they're squishing it here and there and it's a mess. So there's all sorts of little eccentricities that you can find in a medicine chest. Make a note of them and keep it on your checklist, because one day you'll be writing a story and you'll have a minor character and you'll have an opportunity to mention something in their medicine chest that will be interesting.
What about books? What does that tell you about someone?
Well, I always look at books, see what people are reading. You never know what people read. And you'll find anomalies too. You'll find all their books are about one subject, and then they got one book on Aristotle. And you go, what are they reading Aristotle for? But then they'll have another book on how to make $1 million in the stock market or something. You just, this person's got one of their books that they must have read in first grade, and Jimmy Potts Gets a Haircut. And you open it and it's got little illustrations in it. And it's a story about a kid who gets a haircut and the barber made a bad cut and some woman thinks he was hit by a truck. It's a story for like a third grader, and he still got it. I wonder why. Gee, I'll use that in a novel one day. So you make notes of things that you think are interesting, and you put it on your checklist, and you have hundreds of things on your checklist, all sorts of things, just their emotional truth, just their anything. And then when you start writing a short story and you got a character, you think, all right, what have I got on my checklist? Maybe I can use some of this stuff. The way they clean their glasses, the way they wear their glasses.
The inside of their car.
Well, that's another thing like a medicine chest. The inside of the car. I mean, I knew one guy, every time I'd get in his car, I'd say, why don't you grab a shovel and dust up? You know, it was that, it looked like, what do you call it, the junkyard.
Or the ones with the serial killer clean, where you're like, whoa, this thing's been...
You get in a car that's absolutely pristine. And you
Yeah,
go, wow.
a little freaky.
Wow, I don't know. I think I admire this person.
Oh, okay.
They really worked hard. I'll have a penny on the mat, on the, not the driver's seat, but over there. It's been down there for like months, and I just don't feel like picking it up. And I kind of got used to being down there. I figure I'm not going to pick it up. Let's see if someone else picks it up. And if someone else does pick it up, I'll go, oh, okay. Character, interesting. Some people won't let sleeping dogs lie, and some people won't let lying pennies sit. So, you find out little things that are interesting. I read a detective novel a few years ago, 30, 40 years ago. And it was about a character who's a main character in all his detective novels, who is a detective, and a crooked sheriff in a small town in Florida throws him in jail for something. So he's in jail for like 2 days, and he's just trying to keep his sanity and figure out who did the murder. But in order to keep himself occupied, he thinks of things. And one of the things he thinks about, and it's a 2-page essay, you're not old enough to remember this, but when I was a kid and you had skates, nowadays skates are attached to shoes. You just put your foot in the shoe that's got the roller skates attached to it. But when I was a boy, you had the metal skates that had little clamps on it, and it hooked to your shoes. Not tennis shoes. You had to have shoes that had, rims on them that you could hook it on. And then the way you would tighten it would be with a little thing that looked like a little wrench called a skate key. And you always had to have the skate key with you because you never knew when it would change and the skate would fall off, and you'd have to unscrew it, put it back on your shoe, and then screw it again. So where did you keep that skate key? Well, 90% of the kids who skated took the skate key, there was a little hole in it, and they put a string in it, and then they would tie the string around their head, and the skate key would hang here. He wrote 2 pages on a skate key. I don't remember anything about that novel except that essay on a skate key. Has nothing to do with the story, totally irrelevant to the story, except it tells you something about his character. And it became interesting. So little things can be very fascinating in books, even a detective novel where I remember that and I've forgotten everything else.
Right. Or latchkey kids used to have the string. You could always tell in the 80s, the latchkey kids.
Yeah.
And
the latchkey kids would have a string with the key.
Right.
Exactly.
And we were told to hide them so that people didn't know that you'd be going home alone.
Right.
Yeah. My observations. Yeah.
And an extra quarter in your pocket in case you had to call your mom.
Right, for a payphone. Yeah.
Now every kid's got an iPhone.
Sure.
I remember driving around somewhere where I was because I had to call my wife or maybe the person I was living with. I had to call him to tell him I was going to be late. And you're looking for a little payphone. Sometime in a movie when that happens, I'll think to myself, why don't they just call them on their iPhone? And I go, oh, it's 1972. There is no iPhone.
Yeah. I remember being on the phone trying to call my grandmother, letting her know, quote, everything was okay. I was in a little bit of a rough part of town, and somebody was making a nefarious deal and yelling about it, the payphone next to me. And I'll never forget, he was really angry, and I'm thinking, and my grandma was like, is everything okay? Oh, yeah, everything's fine. But that's LA, at that time with the payphones.
I don't know. It could be anywhere. But you see what just happened?
Mm-hmm.
I talked about about stuff in a medicine chest, how you eat eggs, a skate key, and then you thought about the latch key, and then we got into the calling on the phone, and you remembered how you had to call your grandmother to say everything's fine, and someone is yelling over there doing some kind of drug deal or something.
It was bad, yeah.
There's a scene from a novel,
Mm-hmm, yeah.
and which has nothing to do with the story, but it might be the event that the reader never forgets. They'll forget your plot,
Sure.
but they'll never forget that moment where you're on the phone trying to tell your grandmother you're fine, and there's a drug deal going on there, and somebody's yelling and screaming, and you're not exactly in the best part of town.
Right.
Because a phone is a phone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You found a phone, go make the call.
They used to have 3 in a row, you'd go, and then this
Right.
person came after I already got on the call. And
Right. I'll bet you $100 that if I give a young person today a quarter and say, there's a payphone, I want you to make a call on the payphone, okay? They put the quarter in, then dial the number. Hi, hey, Bill? Yeah, I'm calling from a payphone. We have a bet going here, okay? All right, I'm fine. Okay, and they hang up. None of them will check the little coin thing to see if the quarter came back.
right.
But when we did it, when we were young, you did it.
Oh, yeah.
Because sometimes the quarter would drop back into that little thing and you'd get your quarter back.
Right. It was such a treat.
But they wouldn't do that because it wouldn't even occur to them.
Sure. But those are little details too that
Details. Every writing teacher will tell you details.